Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another 9to5Mac podcast. We have with us Seth, Mark, and Dan over there. If you guys just want to say hi for a second.
How's it going?
Happy Friday.
And Mark, I guess, do we have nothing from Mark? Yeah, he's silent. That's cool.
I was getting no idea.
I didn't realize my mic was off.
Blame the earpods.
Was my mic off this entire time?
Yeah.
Oh god, I was talking a lot.
Oh, I thought you were just angry at us.
Kind of
No.
All right, so what we got talking about today, we're going to talk about Mailbox, actually. This is breaking news from earlier today. The Mailbox being bought out by Dropbox, and it's going to be remaining as its own application, but there's a lot of news and kind of speculation as to what the future is there. We're also going to talk about the Galaxy S4. No, this is not 9to5 Google, but there's a lot of implications regarding what that means for Apple. And also the other thing we'll talk about is the status of Windows Phone OS and kind of BlackBerry and the whole entire mobile phone market in general, where it's at. So let's dig right into it with Mailbox being acquired. So they were acquired today by Dropbox, and so it looks like one thing maybe we can finally expect is that there might be no more wait list. Of course, right now the wait list is still around like 600,000 people waiting to use the application. Now, one thing I've really thought about is this wait list something that entices people, that makes it seem like a product that they should that is high value, that there's a lot of people that want it, or is it something that it shows that there was a failed launch, they weren't prepared? So, Mark, where do you feel with that?
Well, I mean, email is really important, and they didn't want to screw up people's email. Obviously, there was a lot of demand for the application, so they decided to roll it out in this gradual line fashion, and they did that to avoid early issues. Like, they had a few server issues in the first few days of launch,
Yeah.
And I imagine if they just let everyone in at once and scaled it not as well as they did, it could have been even worse. So I don't think they did it intentionally to cause buzz and whatnot. Of course, they did that, but I think that was just a byproduct of a smart, not failed launch. And one of the reasons they wanted to team up with Dropbox is they said to be able to further scale Mailbox.
Mm-hmm. He freezed with that one. But I guess.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
Like, I hear this a lot from people who build companies and sell them to bigger companies. They just love their product so much, and it's not only about the money, but it's because if they give it to like a Google or a Dropbox or people with all those resources, they can see their product go into so many more hands just because they have better servers, better architecture, people with more experience working on the product. And Dropbox is very server scaling oriented, and so I think improvements in terms of Dropbox's entry for users and more reliability from that.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, didn't you say you thought that from the onset of when Mailbox was launched that you almost thought that they were going for the thing to get acquired by another company? I think you said that. I'm not holding you accountable for that. I think I remember that, though.
I think I probably said something like that. I mean, they launched this application and they knew it would be ridiculously popular. And they had absolutely no business model.
Right.
Yet. And their future plans for a business model wasn't even clear. So, it's obvious you're making this hit app. They knew it was going to go somewhere. And actually, when I saw the news this morning, I mean, I was like, oh, damn, that was quick. So, that was quick.
Well, what are the other examples of companies doing that?
Well,
like
yeah,
Sparrow?
We'll just finish here. Like,
Sparrow was the one I was thinking of.
Sparrow wasn't that quick. I don't think they planned for an acquisition. Acquisitions, sometimes they just happen overnight, but this was like in a month and a week. I mean, they've obviously been talking to people for weeks before Dropbox didn't call them last night and say, hey, let's make this happen. They've obviously been talking to people. So obviously that was the game plan from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, the quick comparison would be Sparrow. And of course, in that case, Google bought out Sparrow, and now the updates have been just non-existent. There have been a couple updates to make Sparrow for the Mac Retina ready and some other features to it, but there really haven't been that many updates for the Mac or for iOS. And so Dropbox was trying to pretty much say this is not the end of the line for Mailbox. We're going to be making the product better, but it's interesting to see that there's a quick comparison where Sparrow just got kind of thrown to the side.
I think it's going to be very similar to the Instagram purchase by Facebook. I mean, Facebook bought Instagram. Instagram's a standalone app. It has its own team, but Instagram now has the resources that come with a company like Facebook. And, people were worried about Facebook acquiring all of Instagram's data. They want to be part of this. They want to be part of that. But in the end, I don't think they've had any noticeable effect on Instagram. I wouldn't say that a regular non-tech enthusiast person who's an Instagram fan could have any idea that Facebook owns them. It doesn't matter, quite frankly. And I think the same thing's going to happen with Mailbox in terms of how they described it. Will that change in the future? Maybe, but it doesn't seem like that right now. It doesn't seem like the plan for Mailbox to go away. I think the innovation in that space by the Mailbox team is only going to increase because of their new resources.
Yeah. It seems like they're, rather than them focusing on the idea of it being mail, they see it just as a new suite or a new expansion of their own services, and this is just one of the expansions. So do you see it that maybe Dropbox will become a mail competitor where maybe even it's, at Dropbox.com accounts? Or is this where they're just going to be high level where it's the client, they're not actually going to create their own email addresses?
Talking to me?
I guess.
No,
Seth,
go
I
to
can go for it.
I can pop in here. I like to back up a little bit. It's interesting that Mailbox is Gmail only right now, which is a competitor of Dropbox. So it's kind of a strange scenario. Like, I don't think anybody really saw Dropbox being the type. I mean, they haven't really made any big acquisitions to date anyway. But now to buy a company that basically does Gmail, a Gmail interface, seems like a weird acquisition. But to your point on where's Dropbox going, I think this is a clear indication that they have some aspirations for to be a cloud provider of not just data, but also maybe calendars. Now they have emails, maybe calendars, address books, other stuff that may be part of your desktop experience.
Yeah, an iCloud competitor.
iCloud competitor for sure.
I mean, the thing is, Steve Jobs wanted to purchase Dropbox, and I think that's a very interesting thing, is that now they're going around because he saw Dropbox as a way to kind of to build up iCloud. I mean, iCloud was still in its being worked out, and so now they're turning around and building an iCloud. Mark, it seems like you have an opinion on that.
Yeah. I think the story went like what you were saying, but like Steve Jobs didn't even think of Dropbox as the foundation for iCloud. He thought of it like a feature in Finder.
That's true.
Worth $800 million, and I think that really, really turned off the Dropbox team. And to your point, hey, Dropbox is maybe coming out here to compete with iCloud. Like you were saying, it's really interesting. Hey, Jobs tried to buy Dropbox, insulted them. They're coming out here, and they're probably going to make a much more reliable product than iCloud. So. Yeah.
In a way, they're kind of saying, hey, we're not just a quick feature.
Right.
Yeah.
What did you say, Seth?
I don't think it could be less reliable than iCloud. I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, we had more downtime the other day.
Still mention mobile me.
Right, I guess.
Scott, you mentioned Mailbox being a competitor to the native Mail app. What features do you guys hope that Apple kind of pulls from Mailbox and puts into Mail in iOS 7? Sorry to steal your role.
No. That's I was number 500,000 in the wait list for Mailbox, and finally I got it I think it was last week, and I used it for a couple days, and then I did delete it because I didn't really, since it doesn't have a Mac application yet. Whenever anything was added to a folder, it just didn't match with my workflow yet. So if they actually had a full solution where Mail was rethought not only on iOS, but it was also rethought on the desktop, then it seems like a full feature where it's emails aren't something that you just have to let sit in the inbox. Your goal is to create tasks from them and make it so that you know when you're going to resolve your emails. So I think that's something that Apple can consider. But on the other hand, I don't know if it's something that everybody wants. And so it would kind of have to be an optional, because a lot of people just like to have their emails just sit in their inbox and never go for an inbox zero. I don't like that, but there's a lot of people that still have
Let's talk
that
about
idea.
this more. Let's talk about this more. I think, I mean, like Mailbox, what they do well or not do well, what people like about that is getting to the inbox zero really quick. But another aspect of it is pushing things off in rescheduling things and kind of putting it in like a to-do list like fashion. And like Dan was saying, I mean, I think it would be pretty neat if they put in some more integration of your email messages and mail with like the Reminders app or something like that. So that seems like a logical, really logical extension for that. And
yeah, I could see like a button on when you pull up an email, then a button just for creating a task, and then you can even choose specific words or anything else like that. Wasn't that? I feel like that used to be a feature before, where you could create a note from an email.
Something like that. They used to. Okay, so like Reminders and calendars used to be integrated as one, and they kind of tied that into mail, and then they like stripped them all separately when they did Lion and iCloud stuff. But it makes sense if they kind of attach some things back together, like in future versions, correctly. Or more efficiently. And like you were saying, like if they're doing it on iOS, I mean, it would make sense they would do it on, you know, the next version of OS 10 as well. So it's this whole virtuous circle.
I think because it used to be where Mail and Notes were one app, like, or Notes were in Mail, and so it was easier to, you know, make a note from an email or at least have them right next to each other. I think the one thing that a lot of people have been pushing for in iOS 7, and this would make sense for macOS as well, is to make it so that when you want to do something, take an email, you can have many options of how that talks to other applications, including Reminders, Notes, whatever else it is. And so there really isn't a really good cohesive integration between Notes and Reminders and Mail and all of the different apps. And so there needs to be a better connection between all of the apps, especially when we don't have a file structure. We don't have a way to, or a file manager in any sense. And so if we're able to move documents and pictures and whatever else from one app to another really easily, we don't have to bring in a file manager or a Finder or whatever else.
I see what you're saying. I think what you're saying is that, you know how Apple has this whole sandboxing concept where they don't want apps being able to touch other apps in order to keep the operating system stable? I think they've taken that way too far and inappropriately extended it to their own software, not just App Store apps.
I don't think they tried to.
Well, I mean, it's just maybe a coincidence, but I completely agree that lots of Apple apps can be so much better. They could be better integrated.
Yeah, I think it just should be that you can deal with documents, and then when you should be able to just push those to other places where you can be in Pages and then quickly move it over to Dropbox or move it over to another app.
Like if I'm texting someone from my Mac over iMessage or whatever, and then I want to jump into a FaceTime. There's a FaceTime button in Messages, but then that opens the FaceTime app. Yeah. Why does that need to happen? You know?
Yeah, I mean, that could be an API where it just pulls it up in some sort of like a modal window, like a pop-up window. But
right.
The other thing I just noticed the other day, which obviously doesn't matter that much, but I just noticed that they got rid of the old iChat effects where you could have video effects and everything. Did they completely get rid of that?
I think that's in iChat still, or in Messages, but it's not in FaceTime. It never was.
Okay, but like when I guess if I try to talk to somebody, I guess I would just have to go through my AIM account somehow. But at the same time, they've integrated.
Right. It's AIM. You can still do it over AIM. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that kind of integration.
Nobody uses.
Even if it does open up another app, I actually kind of like that integration where I can be messaging you and then quickly press the FaceTime button, and it, in that sense, it's taking your email address and then giving an action to FaceTime to start a call. And so I do like that kind of integration, even if it is on the Mac, it looks like opening up another app. And that's exactly what would happen on iOS, is it would take the email address, move over to FaceTime, to Google Hangout, to whatever else that you can quickly open up and start something else with the same data on the new application.
Right, but I think it's different on iOS than on OS 10 because literally you're jumping from app to app on OS 10, and you can see another app launching. But on iOS, it's like you were saying that you want on OS 10. It's kind of like a FaceTime model pop-up, but because iPhone is full screen naturally, it doesn't look that way. But that's what it basically is, I think.
Mailbox uses gestures really well, though. So
Oh, yeah.
if Apple stole some of those tricks there and integrated them into the native Mail app, I would not hate that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I completely agree. Like, the whole concept of iOS at the beginning was these really cool gestures or whatever.
Right.
But I think they've been resting on their laurels a bit in terms of the gestures, and they've been eclipsed by Android and third-party apps in terms of what could be done. They're not using the technology to their...
Well, like the Tweetbot ones, you could use that in the Mail app for Mac. The way you can swipe and it shows you the conversation and things like that.
Wait, you could do that now?
No. If they... That seems like something they could easily integrate.
Sounds cool.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
I think the problem is that they have so many millions of users. They're kind of getting into a Microsoft issue where they are being used by business people who don't want change. They're being used by old people who don't understand how things work. I mean, I have a few friends that work at Apple support, and they'll get calls where people will call up and say, "I got a new Mac or a new iPad, and it says swipe to unlock. So what do I do?" And so they don't even know how to like press this, which obviously is an outlier. But in that case, Apple has made it so they're trying to make it so everything is really easy to understand. When you open up an iPhone, an iPod, iPad, whatever else it is, you don't have any sort of tutorial. When you first sign up for Dropbox, they give you a step-by-step tutorial. Swipe this way. If you swipe more, you get this action. And so they're trying to avoid to go through any tutorial.
Do people really not know how to slide to unlock? I mean, it sounds weird.
There's people that don't. Not everyone, obviously, but there's people that don't.
I'm actually at my in-laws' place this week, and sometimes I'm amazed about what stuff has slipped by the greater population.
So even still, I can see gestures. Apple has always used gestures to either if it's intuitive or if it's something that is an additional feature, not something that is necessary. And so when it comes to Mailbox, for the most part, you're able to do things without the gestures, but the core experience, the benefit of it is to quickly have those gestures at right there for you, at your fingertips, literally. And so that's where Apple has always tried to make it so they don't need to have any tutorials, and that's why I think they're kind of struck where if they were still an underdog in mobile, if they didn't have tons of old people and business people using their app, then they could go out and do these wild things and gestures that are revolutionary, but take some thought as to how they work. And so there's that great debate of whether or not they should actually move forward with new gestures or if it's too complicated.
You know what's interesting? I remember this a few years ago when the iPad SDK and whatnot first came out. I remember Seth went digging and he found and posted some cool gestures that was in the SDK. Presumably they were testing, but they never actually went public. There were some neat ones like holding down or like three-finger things on iOS.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, and I think the reason they probably ditched those is because moving from the phone to the iPad or just in general iOS, they didn't want people to have to learn all new gestures. And that's one of the reasons why I know you wanted to talk about this later, Scott. We can come back to this at the appropriate time. That's one of the reasons why I don't think iOS 7 is going to be like the huge transformation that
Everyone's hoping.
That not everyone's hoping. See, my mom doesn't care. My dad doesn't care. Okay, but that the 5,000 people follow on Twitter care about. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's a very interesting position where they need to make changes and they need to advance iOS. At the same time, they're selling millions of devices.
Exactly.
And making billions of dollars.
And Twitter had the same problem when they ditched the more advanced 3D stuff and they went to like the basic core experience.
Mm-hmm.
You could say that, oh, everyone hates it, everyone complains. No. 0.0001% of their users don't like it. Nobody cares. Every user is worth the same.
But at the same time, we're getting to this point where like tech titans, people that have opinions on technology, are the ones who decide what the masses prefer. There's a lot of
I disagree, and that's why I think when Apple called Bloomberg, Reuters, and WSJ before the Galaxy event talking about, oh, Android is this, Android is that, that's why I think it's even more ridiculous. I think Apple's starting to believe what you believe, that the tech people matter.
Well, I mean, all my clients all the time would be like, "Oh, I heard on the news guy said that Android has this really cool feature, and I can't do that on my iOS device, and so maybe I should get an Android." And so it's like there's, of course, that's not everyone once again, but it's like there's the idea that they can. A lot of people will just hear what a tech titan says and believe it and go get a $99 tablet or a quick Android tablet and start switching over. And so it in my opinion, I still do. I don't think it actually relates to what Phil Schiller was doing, which I thought was really strange. But I think he should have just stuck to his random tweets that he likes to poke at Android instead of actually going to the Wall Street Journal. But I think there's just a very strange, a strange situation in general where we're at.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should probably talk about that a little bit. I mean, that was a very strange set of interviews. That Schiller did, and even like very strong Apple proponents like John Gruber and MG Siegler were like, "Yeah, that kind of looked bad. Sorry,
Yeah.
It's just like cringeworthy." Ahead of Samsung's cringeworthy presentation there last night. But like even he was throwing out figures like he said that Samsung's phone would come with a year-old OS, and it actually didn't. Like, so he's got bad information. That's interesting.
They have bad sources at Samsung.
Yeah, I mean that's really weird that they would feel compelled to do that. I just I mean it feels like they're believing their own or they're starting to believe the media spin as much as anybody else.
Or they're starting to believe that the media spin actually is. They're starting to believe the link bait is mattering to the mainstream.
Yeah, I think they do think that.
I don't think they've always thought that. I think that's a new thing.
It is a new thing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's new as of yesterday or the day before, but it's obviously not working. Like
the reality distortion is gone.
Right. But I mean, the numbers are still there. Like I mean, it got buried in all the other stuff, but like 4 times the switchers, to iOS. I don't think a lot of people are switching from iOS back to Android.
I highly doubt that. Like once you go iOS, you get pretty glued in.
Yeah, I mean, you get all those apps that you can't get on Android, or you have to pay for it again if you go on Android, and you have all your iTunes and movies and stuff that don't work anywhere else. I mean, anybody I know that's on iOS right now and would even consider Android, like, kind of stops when they think about all their stuff that they'd have to repurchase.
100% agree. Yeah.
But how much of this was done out of the frustration on investors that Apple felt like they had to speak up and they have to start being more vocal and things like that? I know, Seth, you follow all this stuff very closely. So do you think that there's a correlation between that? Yeah,
I guess. I mean, frankly, I don't understand why they did it, but, it has to come from the stress. I mean, Apple typically or historically has kind of been like, hey, we don't worry about investors. The investors will come when they see how well we've done. And because I haven't seen any hard numbers where Apple is actually tanking. We hear like a lot of like analysts who say, well, the supply chain is slowing down and that's why, whatever.
Right.
But like as far as hard numbers and as far as like just like market share stuff, there's nothing that shows that Apple's slowing down.
There was last quarter, I know there's lots of external factors that went into it, but the Mac shipments had people concerned. But there was the iMac shortage. They were unable to meet demand there.
Yeah, Macs are lower, but that Mac is what, 20% of their business? Not even 20% of their business now. And that's kind of just like the PC trend in general. And why are PCs dying out? It's because of the iPad.
Right.
And Apple's making a boatload of money on each iPad. Even the minis, were like the analysts who are like, well, everybody likes the minis and they're cheaper, so Apple's screwed. Minis are cheaper, but Apple's still making a boatload on each one of them. Like, I have no doubt that like the Galaxy Nexus, or sorry, the Nexus 7 The Kindle, like anything 7 inches, is usually $200 or less.
Right.
And Apple's charging $329, and they have the scale and the. So, I'm not worried about margins or anything like that.
Well, it looks
Apple's
like. I think Mark was trying to interrupt you earlier, but his mic wasn't working. So. And we also have Mike who joined us. So welcome, Mike.
Hello.
You're a little blurry, but I think that's okay. Yeah, we can hear you though.
All right. It told me my mic wasn't working, so I don't know.
You're good. Well, I think the other thing I want to talk about is Apple's advertising, because we can get into that as well. Where Ken Siegel, once again, when he was at U of A last week, he was saying how he actually thinks that their advertising is stagnant, it's stale. They really need to do something special compared to where they're at. And he was actually saying that he likes Samsung's ads right now more than what Apple has, just because it's new, it's fresh, he really likes actually. At first, he hated the ads that made fun of people sitting in line at the Apple retail store, but now he thinks that they're kind of getting better and better with how they're approaching it. So I think, well, then they have that stupid yelling commercial again where they talk about like explosive or whatever. Like they keep on yelling out different adjectives, and I think the ads are just ridiculous right now. It is time where they can come out with something, some sort of advertising that's different, something that isn't following the same method that they've done for the past 6-7 years now.
That's okay. Yeah.
What, Mark? You think it should stay the same?
No. I agree with you that the current ads are not as, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's more like a time thing. But like last year, the 2012 ads were bad. The ads, okay, I'm gonna cut to the chase. The ads.
You love the Genius.
No,
the Genius ads. That's what you love.
Since Steve Jobs died, the ads have been pretty bad. I'm not saying that's directly related to Steve Jobs, but I'm saying that in terms of, he passed away in late 2011. I don't think any of the ads from 2012 are good. I don't think any of the ads this year are good so far. You know what was a good ad? Seth and I were talking about this, the iPad 2 ads. Like the We Believe and all that, like technology doesn't exist, we just give you this product and it works great, whatever. Those were good ads. Even the iPhone 4S, which I'm sure Steve had a hand in, were good. That I remember there was some report that it was their most successful ad or the best ad of 2012 was the iPhone 4S ad talking about the camera.
Yeah, I was gonna say the FaceTime one. I remember that.
The FaceTime ones were good too. The FaceTime.
Yeah.
The ads haven't been good for 2 years.
I didn't actually mind the Genius ads that much. I know a lot of people hated them, but I didn't.
Well, clearly they were bad enough for Apple to literally take them off the air.
And take them off their website even.
I never remember that happening.
YouTube.
Yeah,
I guess part of it is that I kind of identify with the poor Genius guy on the commercials. I'm always the one that people go to like that.
Yeah,
like,
I think the thing was...
I get strangers asking me that stuff, so...
I think the general public might have received it well, but I think everyone that was that's seen Apple ads and kind of followed how the methodology is behind it, kind of saw them as laughable, and it just seemed like it was another Best Buy Geek Squad guy helping people out, but he just so happened to just be Apple.
Yeah, I agree. You know what else was actually a good ad recently? The iPad Mini ad, the first ones.
Yeah.
They came out with 3 when the iPad Mini first launched.
Oh yeah.
The GarageBand one where they slide up the Mini and they're playing that song on the piano, and then they have the iBooks and the iPhoto version. Those were good, but they were taken off the air after a month or two. I don't know, and they replaced them with this new series. I don't like that decision. I mean, the first iPad Mini ads were good, and I think they were effective too. So
yeah,
I'm not sure why they removed those so quick.
Those ads really drove home the point that the iPad Mini can do everything that the iPad can. It's the same exact thing, has the same functionalities and features, just a little bit smaller.
Exactly, and I don't see the point of these ones. But maybe when you think about it, those first 3 ads that presented the iPad Mini, fine. Maybe they felt like people they understand that now. Now let's talk about all the apps, because Apple apps is a big deal, and these are all app-related things. So I guess logically it makes sense, but the timing of how fast they're pushing the campaign changes doesn't.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, I think we definitely moved away from Mailbox, which is where we were at. But let's talk about the S4. and so it's coming out in late April. 9to5 Google has most of the information about what it is and what it includes. I think the first thing I kind of well, we'll talk about the presentation first. That was I don't know if it was atrocious or if it was perfect.
You don't say.
It wasn't perfect.
It was perfectly atrocious. I'll say that. It was quite the fanfare, and it was more like a Broadway show as they were trying to go for.
I think it was more like a middle school show.
Oh yeah.
Did they know it was going to be dorky? I mean, even the actors seemed like they didn't want to be there.
Wait,
one of the actors was supposedly. Is that your way to shut me up?
No, that's what they did the whole time during the event.
Yeah.
Oh, hello. No, there was the boyfriend that was taking pictures of his girlfriend, and then they made it sound like he was just taking pictures of his girlfriend wherever she went. And so then the actor was like, "Oh no, I'm just taking pictures of the restaurant, and she so happens to be in the picture." And he sounded like he did not want to say that line at all. So, do you think is it Samsung meant to make it dorky to get people talking about it, or do they just not understand the market, or like just people in general, like how we think of presentations? Mike?
I think that they don't understand, like, I don't think they tried to make it dumb, and some people might look at it and say, oh, well, they tried to make it really dumb, so we talk about it for weeks, and we will talk about it for weeks, but not in a positive light, and I don't think that's really what they wanted. When you're advertising or marketing a product, you don't want it to be they go, oh, did you see the Galaxy S4? Yeah. That was a really dumb presentation. You don't want people to associate it with something that's dumb or annoying or embarrassing. I mean, if you had the phone, would you be like, oh, yeah, I got this phone because I saw this presentation online? Would you admit to having enjoyed the presentation enough to buy the phone?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was actually watching the presentation with one of my friends who owns an S3, and she loves Android. She hates iOS. She like she tries to make fun of my iPhone all the time, and even she was totally just like embarrassed for Samsung. She's like, I love Samsung, but I don't love Samsung. Like, this is just embarrassing. And it's weird because there's Qualcomm's presentation, which was atrocious, but at the same time, this one actually seemed like it was a different level. The other one, it was professionally atrocious. They were trying to make it really dorky, and it just sounded really weird. This one, they were trying to do so much fanfare and make it a huge event that just it fell apart on itself.
Well, they've had a good run recently. I mean, maybe they've gotten caught up in their own hype and some of their own success that they've had recently, and they thought, you know, our ideas can't be bad. Look at all the success we've had, and they turned into a PlayStation 4 event.
Well, yeah, but I mean, at least they announced something. But I think one thing I was thinking, and I'm not sure if this is completely true with how this was panned out, but they're a South Korean company, and so I'm sure in other countries they see America and they see our Broadway, and they think that that's all what we're about. We're about this big glitz and glam kind of thing, and so. It might be that there was just the high-level executives in South Korea that said, oh, Americans, they love glitz and glam. Let's make a huge Broadway show just about the S4.
I keep wanting to say 4S.
Well, I was actually going to jokingly say that. So let's talk about the Galaxy S or 4S. Oops.
Oh, yeah, that's a good topic about, like, The Verge had some article that Samsung copied Apple by making the design of the Samsung similar. I mean, they make some, interesting points, but I mean, I think this just goes to show you that Apple's not the only one who can't test, design, market, and manufacture a new tens of millions of units phone design every calendar year.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I saw a lot of people saying that, I mean, the S3 worked, they sold lots, and so why do they need to change the design? And it's following the Apple kind of model where they. I
don't think the Apple model is only. I mean, there's just so many things you can knock out in a year. I mean.
But it makes sense from a financial standpoint. They don't have to put in the R&D each year. They get the economies of scale with creating the same exact form factor. The factory workers don't need to be retrained. They don't need to get new pieces of equipment.
Exactly.
It helps them increase their bottom dollar at the end of the day.
So if the stock, plummets the day that the 5S is announced, I'm going to be calling everyone an idiot because it's going to be the best thing in the world for shareholders because the phone's profit per unit is just going to shoot up because of what Dan just explained.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the S3 event equally dumb? Like, I remember watching that and going, what are they doing? And like that when it wasn't about Broadway, they were just talking about like nature and how the phone was like inspired by a river and three small stones or something. I mean, I just think they're really bad at presentations.
Yeah, they don't have a really good understanding of the audience.
But does it matter? I mean, they got their sales and everything's working, and so does it? I mean, does it really matter that they suck at these presentations as long as they have an event that says, we're releasing this, and they give some specs, which they went way into specs, and there was actually one time where they talked about like hexapixels or something else like that.
Hexaband.
Hexaband. Yeah, they were talking about LTE and how it works on all the bands, and they said there were hexabands. And one of the actor on stage, she goes, "I bet I'm the only one in this room that doesn't know what that is."
Yeah.
And everybody was supposed to ha ha ha, but it's like, okay, if not everybody knows what it is, and pretty much nobody in the room did know what it is, why do you have to tell that during the presentation? I understand that it's a press event, and the press will be able to kind of compare that between, or kind of maybe even translate from geek to real people speak, but to admit to the audience that not everybody knows, or the majority of people don't know what it is, it really goes against what you kind of expect from a keynote, where the audience can directly understand every single word that you say because you're trying to kind of introduce a new product.
But we don't want the definitions of those crazy terms either. We want the benefit to us.
Yes.
I remember Jobs actually did that once.
Yeah.
He said, I don't know what this is, but it works, and it's great.
See?
I forget the context, but yeah, he definitely did that.
Oh, what was that?
I
feel like he said that all the time when he was talking about like the new CPUs on computers all the time.
Yeah, it was CPU related or something.
I think it was about Xcode. Because I remember going, I don't know what that is, and then Steve Jobs was like, I don't know what that is, and I was like, oh, okay, so it's not just me.
Yeah, it might be in the presentation when the guy said that Steve should get rid of debugging, and then it like totally threw off the presentation for a couple seconds because they got rid of like a bunch of different steps when you're trying to compile an app, and then some guy screamed out, "Get rid of debugging," and then Steve just kind of like stared at him for a second, but. Yeah, that's the main thing is that Apple, they don't focus on specs, which, all the Android people and Windows people, when Windows versus Mac actually mattered, then they would always fight and say Apple has terrible specs. But when Apple always tries to focus on the idea that it's not about the specs, it's about the experience, what the value is that you're getting out of the product. Well,
so let me just say, like, Apple does care about specs, and they do often. I mean, like, how thin is the iPhone? They always tell you how thin it is. How light is it? They're going to give you the grams. They're going to.
I don't see those as specs, though.
And there's clear user benefits to the average person.
I mean, there's clear user benefit to RAM too. But,
yeah, I mean, they pick and choose their specs really carefully, and they make sure that they're not too geeky, and that, like you said, that there's some sort of tangible benefit to everything. Like, obviously a smaller phone or a lighter phone is going to be beneficial. Everybody on Earth knows why a smaller phone is better or a lighter phone is better.
They still don't release RAM specs, right, for iOS devices?
No, and they're usually lower than the we're at like 1 gigabyte now.
1 gigabyte.
Whereas the typical flagship Android phone has 2 gigabytes.
A really interesting spec, I think, with the iPhone in particular, and the way Apple, like Seth was saying, they choose carefully, is the camera megapixels. Because, I mean, like, they don't want... It's clear that they say, it doesn't really matter what the megapixels are. It's all about taking a great picture. They say this all the time. But something with megapixels in society, it's so... The number of megapixels, is, even if it doesn't really matter, is so tangible to people.
Well, there's nothing else. There's no other way that normal people...
Right, exactly. People don't understand. Apple hasn't educated people to see it any other way. So, and I don't think they're going to. So,
yeah.
It's a megapixel race, even though the megapixels don't matter.
I've seen so many times where
According
people
to
just will post an iPhone photo and it looks really good, or the what was it, the Grammys, where the end of the photo or the end of the video that won was recorded using an iPhone. And so there's people are starting to understand that the iPhone just has a really good camera. And so that's where we're at. I don't think Apple really needs to focus on the megapixels, because people just generally know, besides the first and second iPhones, the iPhone usually has a pretty good camera. You don't agree?
I mean, I think the iPhone is known for its high quality camera. But you know, the megapixel race, there's already LG's got a 13 megapixel camera, and now Samsung does too. Are people going to say, well, I want a better camera, so megapixels equals better? I think some people will, and I think HTC is in a big bind because of it. They have an ultra pixel thing in their new One, and it's actually 4 megapixels, which is, you know, not very good for a flagship phone in terms of megapixels, but the pixels are bigger and they let in a lot more light. But it's kind of hard to explain all of that, and I don't think HTC is doing a very good job of getting that information out there. So, like, Apple's kind of in a predicament where they either have to explain themselves, the camera, a little bit better, or they have to keep up with the megapixel race.
Why don't we talk about the camera rumors then for the next phone? So from what I have seen, there's 2 camps right now. Like iLounge, they said it was going to be a 13 megapixel, and then I keep forgetting his name, but that analyst that people think is accurate for some reason keeps saying it's 8 megapixels, but with no real changes, except it's going to be a smaller focus or a bigger focus, something like that. I don't know, bigger lens size or something. So I don't know.
We need a sushi leak, like what was that for the 4S?
That was so great.
The Cupertino sushi leak.
Yeah, I guess for people that don't know, there was a picture that was on Flickr that was just a picture of somebody's lunch. Like, it was pretty much cafeteria lunch, and people kind of noticed that it was like Apple's cafeteria food. And then when they looked at it, that the megapixels were different, or the amount of pixels width and height were different than the current iPhone. And so right away it gave us the specs for the new iPhone's camera. So yeah, why don't we go serve them sandwiches that they actually want to post on Instagram, or Flickr, and we'll start getting data. Yeah. Well, let's talk really quick. I know this is kind of getting into 9to5 Google again, but it seems like there was a lot of limitation as to what kind of features they can come out with, because they're working on top of the Android operating system. So they have things like Air Gesture, working with their new Home Sync device, but it seems like they're really restricted because they're going on top of an operating system, whereas Android is the operating system itself. So there's a lot of things we can talk about where there's the interesting relationship between Google and Samsung, where now Samsung came out with all these features, but what happens if Google wants to turn around and release these features themselves for all of the other vendors? Like, the relationship seems really odd right now.
I think it is. It's a weird predicament, but when you kind of delve deeper, Samsung can't build an OS, so it's going to either need to fork Android and then be kind of stranded, or they're going to need to stay with Google. And Google obviously wants to keep Samsung on board, although it does sound like they're moving away from. They're trying to get other manufacturers up to speed. As far as the S Voice being built on top of, or S products being built on top of Android, it doesn't always work out as well as it appears. You know, I had a Galaxy S3, or I still do somewhere, and the S Voice was just killing me, because you want to use Google Now Voice, and Samsung, in order to have the S Voice, put it as the default voice action on the phone. So if you wanted to, you can get to the Google Voice action by like clicking on a bunch of stuff, but like the default action of holding the button down, like you do on Siri, brought you to Samsung's service, which was much worse than Google's. So now, like, oh, what's going to happen now with these S actions that Samsung has? Are they going to overwrite the stuff you like in Google more? Probably, and I don't think it's going to add any appeal to the platform. So, I mean, that might be me. As far as Android goes, I would much rather have a Nexus device than anything that Samsung or HTC.
I'm really curious about your opinion, Seth, on a pure Nexus device versus the iPhone 5. Like, I know you're an Android fan, but you use and an iOS fan, and you use both a lot in your day-to-day life and work and whatnot. Like, what do you think? Like, if you had to use one, which would you use and why? And all biases aside, like. Seriously, because I remember, I remember that picture of you walking out of the Apple Store in 2007 when the first iPhone came out, holding it up in the air or something, and then when you wrote your review for the Telegraph or whatnot, or the Guardian.
I don't know. Honestly, I switch back and forth. Like right at this very moment, I think I'm probably a fan of the Nexus, but Sorry, guys.
Mark is now editor-in-chief of 9to5Mac. Seth,
but I still have my iPhone 5 in my hand.
All right, I guess to get into the actual, what is your reasoning behind it?
I mean, I'm a big user of Google services, and Google Voice and Google Gmail and Maps are the things that I use the most, and the screen size is a little bit bigger in the Nexus 4.
Were you a Google Reader fan?
Yeah, I was actually. I whatever. I use Twitter mostly for repeat. But so why do I like it? The three things that I use most: Gmail, Maps, and the voice thing are a little bit better for me on the Nexus. If I want to take a picture, I'm grabbing the iPhone 100 times out of 100. Like it's not even a question. If I want to do some apps, like if I'm going to do something with Facebook or something else, I can't think of anything off the hand. Let's see. I'm probably going to grab the iPhone. So the core apps for me are a little bit better on the Nexus.
Would you say like the Gmail app on the iPhone versus the one on the Nexus, like which is better? Is it the iPhone app standalone on the iPhone is better than the Google one, or it's just like you're living in an integrated fashion on the Nexus 4s? I'm just trying to see why one's better than the other in terms of the core Google apps, because every Google app, or most of them, are available on iOS as well.
Right. Okay, so Google Voice is built in. So when I make a call out, it looks like it's coming from Google Voice. So when I call out on my iPhone, it calls out from the T-Mobile number.
Oh. Okay.
So it doesn't. So when somebody calls me back, I don't get it on both phones, or if I don't have the iPhone with me. So it kind of messes things up. Google Voice is a lot better on Android. That's just a given.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing.
That's actually the one thing. That's the one thing I do miss from Android is where whenever I was making a call, I could choose whether it was from my Google Voice number or from my cell phone number. Right. And so right now I have GV Mobile Plus by Sean Kovacs, and that's the one that I use. But it's like to make a phone call, it's a process to go in to then use a different contact loader and all that fun stuff, rather than just going through making a phone call in my contacts list and then having it there.
That's why I stopped using my Google Voice, because it was such a convoluted process to make a call from that number.
Well, it's not.
It's my work phone number.
I mean, it's not on Android. It's kind of more convoluted, just because Android obviously gives Google Voice lower level access to the stuff.
Now, there was a jailbreak tweak that actually did that on the iPhone that made it so that texting and calling could be done in the native apps from your Google Voice number, and that was nice. But
I should have jumped on that actually. So.
Oh, here's a question, because I'm not really that familiar with Android. Like, Android has its, phone app, like a dialer and contacts or whatnot. Could you actually set that built-in phone app to be through your Google Voice account rather than your carrier?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you choose. You can either choose Google Voice. You can choose based on the call, or you can always have it be your phone.
So it's pretty much a no-brainer. for Google Voice.
For people who use Google Voice, it's very like it's a big thing, and that's I mean that's probably the thing that pushes it over